Okay, we can call the meeting to order. And a reminder to everybody use their microphone because we're tape recording this because we don't have a writer-downer person. So like, was that a good? Well, Weiler wasn't here to correct me, so I didn't know what to do. Looking for a motion on the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Hennessy, second by Weiler. Any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Status report on our ongoing audits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve Smith, the Director of Audits. The child care licensing unit, we just presented that to fiscal last Friday, so that is now a done audit and released. Board of Dental Examiners, we just had our 1-year anniversary on this audit back in December. All of our observations are in the hands of the board as well as OPLC. They have provided responses to us on some of them, and they just got possession of the last batch within the last couple of weeks. The responses that we've gotten back, we're trying to reconcile and work with them to help them better understand where we're coming from, as well as help them to respond more appropriately, if I can put it that way, to make sure they're addressing the recommendations and they understand them. And again, because this encompasses both the board operations as well as it goes into many areas of OPLC, it's going to be another lengthy report. I think we have about 30 some odd observations. And so we're attempting to work with the board. There is a little bit of frustration on their part, being unfamiliar with the process and the fact that they are part-time board members and understanding things. So we're trying to work with them and work through it. So that's our hope is that at some point this spring we'll be able to tie it up and present it to fiscal. So I have a package here for you, Representative Weiler. If you need
Printed it. Thank you.
Representative Umberger.
Yes. Is the problem the board or is the problem the OPLC?
I would say right now, I'm careful to use the word problem because it may just be an education process on their part, or just not really understanding what their responsibilities are for statute, what understanding their control environment or lack thereof and what it should be. I would say OPLC, I think, gets it. It's largely the board members, and of course they meet once a month, and so trying to get them to convene and to work through these issues is part of the challenge.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
third on the list there is the mental health workforce requirements. If the committee remembers, you approved that topic and gave it to us last meeting, and then fiscal subsequently approved that. So we are currently scoping that out and beginning some planning for that. So at our next meeting, we'll have a scope statement for you to approve on that topic. And then the fourth one is the, according to chapter law, is the review, I guess, or special project that we're doing on the New Hampshire retirement system and the healthcare subsidy. We're close to the end on that. We've drafted a report. We're just reviewing it now. Maybe a couple of outstanding questions with Department of Administrative Services and New Hampshire retirement system, but we should be within the next month, hopefully, bringing that letter to Mike Kane and then subsequently to the fiscal committee. So in terms of our current ongoing audits, that's a quick update. On topic number 3, you'll see in your package a pre-scope statement that we were asked to do on special education, and with a few options in the back of performance audit, like how we could approach with a performance audit. The primary author of this is John Clinch. He's here if you'd like a presentation or have him walk you through it. We'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, you can just discuss it. So,
Okay, let's have John do the overview, and the result of the study committee led us to seek a much broader scope than just the dispute resolution process, and you may have discovered some of the issues.
Thank you. For the record, my name is John Clinch. I'm a senior audit manager with the Office of Legislative Budget Assistant. Good afternoon, and thank you. We prepared this pre-scope statement based on the work that the Alternative Dispute Resolution Committee had done. We do have a description of the alternative dispute resolution processes. That's on page 3. There's basically 3 of those. But we were feeling from this committee that it wanted a little bit broader look at special education in general. So we prepared this pre-scope statement with frequency of the disability on table 1 on page 1. Gives you an idea of what the disabilities that the children are dealing with. Then we have the Bureau of Special Education Support, which is the organization within the Department of Education that oversees most of the special ed programs. Within the Bureau of Special Education Support, there are 3 offices: the Office of Finance and Data Management, the Office of Special Education Training and Monitoring, and the Office of Special Programs. And within those, there's a little description of each on page 2. I can go over those if you'd like.
Please do.
Okay. The Office of Finance and Data Management deals with all the federal grants for special education in the state, court-ordered placements, and the New Hampshire Special Education Information System. They're also responsible for all the data that is maintained by the Bureau of Special Education Services, and they create and submit the state performance plan and audit performance report for the U.S. Department of Education. The Office of Special Education Training and Monitoring, they train fields related to special education. Those would be the teachers, occupational therapists. Yes.
I was involved a few years on, as you know, the charter schools don't have special ed sections. So it's the responsibility of the sending district to provide the special ed. That's been kind of a problem area. And I would like kind of a little closer examination within that bureau on that, because I think that there's all sorts of arrangements. Some work very well together, the district and the charter school. In other cases, they seem to be putting up roadblocks and making difficulties, and I don't think it's overseen enough from what I've heard when I had a committee on this. Anyway, just want to mention that as a side area to look at in those areas. Thank you, John.
Okay. I think that's something that can be looked at. We have, as Steve mentioned, we have sort of a menu of audit topics that you could look at. They're numbered A through D. A is the alternative dispute resolution audit that focuses pretty strongly just on the dispute resolution process. We can add on to that item B, which is looking at the costs of special ed in the state. The performance audit there would look at the resources and uses of special ed funds and the efficiency and effectiveness of DOE's management of the special ed costs in New Hampshire. Grant management, collection of financial data from local school districts and other entities. We last did a performance audit in that area in 1999, so it's been quite a while since we've done anything there. That could be done in conjunction with the next item, or it could be done independently. The next item is data collection and analysis. That's also through the Office of Financial and Data Management. The statute requires that the DOE collect, organize, and analyze data about programs, conditions, and instruction. and that involves, they primarily oversee the New Hampshire Special Education Information System, which I don't believe has ever been looked at. So that's kind of an important project. And then the last thing we have is, I think this answers Representative Weiler's question. Statute requires the Division of Learning Services or Learning Support to help school districts meet their responsibilities regarding special ed students, develop and analyze information on issues and problems of regional and statewide importance, assist school districts in managing these issues, and monitor and maintain information about national and regional trends. That would be more of a generally focused audit on the, not just the Bureau of Special Ed Services, but a larger one dealing with special ed that cross-cuts the different bureaus. And I think that's something that could focus on the charter and local school district difficulties. So we have, there's lots of different ways we can take this. You can select one or two or more off of the menu here, or we can do something more specific that you request us to do. It's really up to you how you want us to.
So here's what the study committee uncovered, was we took testimony, and I gave you the binder I had of testimony, a 4-inch binder, and not a happy story in the whole binder.
Right.
And what appears to be happening is that in combination with a law firm and the school districts, they seem to ally themselves together against the parents. And the whole scenario is the parents get discouraged and beaten down until they give up. And then that seems to be how we've satisfactorily sought resolution in the special education process. So in the meantime, we have hundreds of little children who get to be bigger children who don't learn how to read and become unemployable. So for some reason, we're expending a lot of money to produce the very large number of unemployable adult human beings. And that's the purpose of our requesting this audit, is to find out what's going on there and what are the incentives that cause this to happen to all these children. So you're the guys to get to the bottom of this, however far you have to take it. But this is a very expensive and serious problem for all of these families and all of these children and all the well-meaning people working in the education system who are trying to educate people who are difficult to educate. And because a parent gives up is not a successful resolution to the problem. So we need to find out what's going on there so that we can do something about it to stop this from happening. But we can't just, somebody suggested, they said, well, just build another prison for them and just put them in the prison because they're all going to get in trouble the rest of their life anyway. So at least we'll keep them warm and dry and dressed and give them some meaningless occupation. But this can't go on like this. You just can't have all these people at loose ends because they can't read, they can't do the math, they don't understand the science, and because they've been oftentimes kept in a separate room in the school where they can apparently play video games or watch television, but just don't disturb the regular classroom. So what we can do about the lack of people that are able to train people, that's also a problem for the college and university systems because they're not producing people. And we need to know what's going on besides how successful the law firms are. That's not a satisfactory resolution to this heartbreaking problem. So I leave that in your able hands. Senator Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Totally concur. I'm curious, and more than curious, I think we need to figure out what are the metrics that we use to evaluate the system and also to evaluate your success in bringing back a report that both identifies the problems, for us in a way that we can address them legislatively if necessary. So I'm not sure what the metrics would be, and maybe John, the study might provide some guidance on that.
They have they know how to. Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. Letter A, dispute resolution process. In looking at the mediation process, when you do the audit of this section, which I would encourage you to do, in your mediation on the second and third lines, well, first through third, it says, in mediation, either party may be accompanied and advised by individuals with specific knowledge or training with respect to the needs of children and disabilities. Is there a way, to some of Senator Reagan's points, for us to look at and count for these mediation processes who is coming for the child and the parent or the guardian, and who is coming on the other side, and who these special knowledge individuals are, so that we can see to what all of the 4-inch binder said, is that these parents don't have the special knowledge that they need, and it's very expensive to go out and look for an individual to advocate for your child's behalf on what, and the school should be doing that to begin with. So I want to look at who's coming to these meetings, and is it a balanced and fair and process?
That's a very good point. When I had that same question as I was writing this background here, and I went to the Department of Education website, and I was looking for that information. At least give me an idea of how many mediations do they have, how many dispute resolution hearings do they have, and I couldn't find any of that on their website. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist there, and I would presume it exists at the department level, but when we write these, we write them on public information that's available on the web or other sources, the laws. So we haven't contacted the Department of Education yet. That would be part of the audit topic, that we would go and find that information out, and we would present that in the audit report.
You're not going to get your answers from the Department of Education, because they're in self-protect mode about a lot of this. Commissioner's not aware of a lot of what goes on there. Karen?
Thank you. One of the things that is very difficult is the rules that are part of IDEA, the federal law. And that, in fact, in my opinion, is what is causing a lot of this to occur. Because the school system can always say, well, IDEA says this, therefore, and it's very difficult to, and I'm not even sure that there's anyone at the state level who is an advocate for the parents in this regard. Because if you don't understand IDEA, and you don't understand where, what they're saying, then the disputes generally end up negative for the child. Anyhow, just my thought.
Senator Khan.
Thank you, Chairman. So, one of the issues, I think, is there are 30,000 students, 29, that are receiving special education services. That's a lot of students. Obviously, we're doing well by some, probably by most. I think trying to sort out this population and where the problems exist is, I mean, we can't turn our back on these problems.
They may have multiple.
But another topic that I hope that we do pick up on is if we haven't looked in 22 years at how the various sources of funds that go towards special education, what the amount is, how it fits into the overall delivery, I think that that's an important feature. We know that, I mean, you're going to find out that it costs $20,000 above whatever we're paying per student for special education, per special education student, on an average. And where those dollars are coming from, I think is an important matter for us to understand. So I hope that you will pick up. I hope this committee will encourage at least Part B, which probably requires Part C to go with it, so that we just ought to have a policy. Policy ought to be based on some of the data that we can hopefully get out of this system, and from the department and from the districts, because clearly we know that there are 29,000 students here. All right, I think that, so Mr. Chairman, I hope that we'll empower the auditors to delve into this, not just on the complaint side, but on the overall volume, the sources of funds that we're putting towards it, the data that we collect and need in order to develop good policy.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on the data that's been presented. These numbers came from the Department of Education,
Yes, they did.
and how do they get this data? What's their methodology to make sure that these things are properly reported and they're properly identified?
That's a very good question, and I'm afraid I don't have an answer for you. That's one of the things that we would determine during the audit, is what is the reliability of this data and what are the sources it comes from. At some level, it's got to come from the local school districts. So how is it tallied up when it gets to the State Department of Education?
Okay. I think that would be fundamental. The validity of this data and how these categories have been selected for people. Now, I see deaf and blind as 17. Well,
Yeah,
we have a program in Manchester for deaf and hard of hearing. We have a whole section of the school that's allocated to this. We used to take students from the outside. Anyway, there seems to be an inconsistency here, but I think if you could focus in on that, I mean, that's the base of the audit. The audit has to be derived from the people that we're serving, and if we know who we're serving, then I think we can attempt to serve them properly. But if they're not properly identified, then it goes back to what you said, John. They just throw them to the side,
Right.
and they're still passing kids through.
Oh, yeah.
And just promoting them based on time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I look at the data that's presented, 29,195 children out of an 80,000 student population. So I would have to assume that some of these children are receiving multiple of these. I refuse to believe that 37.5% of our school children are in special ed. So that would be something in terms of the data. Again, I have to be, I just,
It's out of 160,000.
is it 160? That's still a high percentage.
It's 15%, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I thought it was 80,000 students.
No, it's 160,000 students.
Okay.
Down from 200,000 about 12, 15 years ago.
My mistake, but still a high percentage.
Yeah. That's what a serious problem it is.
if I could,
Yes,
if I
please.
could, Mr. Chairman. This, everything that is in this proposal is extremely important. Okay, but the problem is, how long do we want this audit to take? Okay, and if they looked at A, B, C, and D, in my humble opinion, in order for them to do a good job, it's going to take them 2 years just to get to it, to get through all of it. And if that's what we want, I don't have a problem with that. But there's a lot of stuff here. And if, I don't know how familiar you are with special ed, but it's a rabbit hole that has no bottom. So anyhow, I just ask how far do we want them to go at this time?
I would not like to see them proceed only just far enough to not reach a conclusion. Yeah,
And it's been 23 years.
right, so maybe 2 years is the,
I mean, that's absolutely fine. I just don't want us to get our expectations up that we're going to get this in 6 months, because it's not
Oh,
going to
no.
happen.
Well, I think it's important enough that we don't need to try to rush it, because
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I agree.
I think in the past 23 years, it's really grown. I mean, they've increased the bureaucracy. In the past 23 years, what I see is a big growth in the bureaucracy at the local levels. I mean, in some school districts, the staff almost is equal to the number of coded students. That's getting a little out of hand. Thank you.
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Representative Umberger's point, could we break this up into 2 separate audits? Do A as one? No?
I wouldn't do that.
Based on the look on your face, Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming no.
No. So I had the good fortune, once upon a time, to be interviewed in the preliminary interviews for a performance audit. And it wasn't quite like being in the back room at the police station, but it was a pretty intense process. And I said, there is a skill to this. So, and it was Mr. Clinch that did the interview.
Smiling.
It's, yeah, all the time. He was smiling all the time, yeah. Yeah. But they're good people to allow them to follow their nose and find the correct conclusion, so.
If I may, I can repeat back some of what I've heard. I hear loud and clear that there's an interest in dispute resolution, and I think that's something that can be done pretty focused and fairly quickly as a standalone audit. And then the other part is more of a general special ed audit that looks at costs, looks at how IEPs are formed and the support that the Department of Education provides to the local school districts, and that would be more of a broader spectrum of looking more in depth at the special ed system, and I think that's a separate audit, and that would take a little bit longer, but you could have your fairly focused and dispute resolution audit done first, and then perhaps you could turn us loose on the more general special ed system audit.
If that would be your advice to how do we get to answers to questions, how do we stop this waste of human talent from being eaten up by a system that doesn't operate to the most benefit to their customers, which are too young and too small to figure out what to do. So, So you're pitting parents against law firms, and that's, does not come out good for anybody.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think, I kind of concur with John that I think to help the committee and at least begin to get some answers quicker, we could do this dispute resolution process. But as we gain understanding and get more information, recognizing the other concerns and the other questions, we can certainly start with that. And then as we get further down the road, if it would seem like efficiently and effectively we can incorporate some of these other concerns into the audit, we can come to you and ask for the topic to be expanded. Or, again, at a subsequent, when we finish this one, we can move on to that other area. So it is it's something that we can come back to you and you can certainly expand the scope once you approve it. We're gonna have to come back with the scope statement anyways, once we begin to interact with the agency. And at that point, based on our understanding, we can make a recommendation that we also incorporate perhaps some of these other concerns, if it makes sense.
So the behavioral problem children seem to produce the most disputes because they're very difficult to work with and very hard to see any light come through. So in the binder, you've got access to some pretty damaged witnesses being parents of special needs children. So if you can address them, you can find out the areas of most concern. I'm sure there's a lot of areas that are not of concern and that they are able to handle and help the children adjust to the world they live in. So, Senator Khan.
Mr. Chairman, and respecting the ideas that were presented by our auditors, I would hope that the scope statement would cover A, B, and C. You could indicate that there's an interim report that is going to be prepared. But I think in order for us to, I just would hate to see us say that we can look at one part here and arrive at good conclusions without having looked at, okay, so what are the funding sources? How are they derived? How are they distributed, allocated? Maybe pick up on Representative Weiler's question about charter students, and because they're clearly in these numbers, and what the data systems allow us to look at on a recurring basis. So I think if I would hope that you'd come back with something that's comprehensive, that indicated you'd have an interim report.
They know what. Anyone else before we conclude this topic?
So, are we then gonna do the suggested, does that require a motion, or we just let them go?
Just let them go. They always come back. So.
Well, I guess that's the question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is do you want us to do some more digging before you officially give us a topic to present to fiscal? Or in other words, is the committee ready to give us the question to be answered or the topic that we can then go to fiscal and actually begin the
I
audit?
think we could use more information because this is a very broad topic, and it touches on a lot of happy spots and a lot of sore spots, and so.
We come back. So- Okay.
So we'll meet again here for scope statement before fiscal. What? We might not be ready. some fiscal.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay. And next, we have weatherization and fixed-wing aircraft.
Yes, and those, the committee at prior meetings just kind of tabled those, but didn't like do away with them. I will, at the back of your package, I think in particular to address Senator Guyder's questions or requests. There's some information, and Steve Lavoy from Department of Safety is here, so he'd be happy to walk you through the memo and some of the data that he provided to us and to you, the committee. So that's up to you. But our goal is to get at least one or two topics, so beyond these, we're not aware of any other that are potential topics for us.
So think of things in your committees now that don't seem to be working quite right and propose audit topics. Steve Lavoy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Steve Lavoy, Director of Administration for the Department of Safety. The memo that we provided to you today tries to start the discussion related to the benefits and risks of owning versus leasing the state police fixed-wing aircraft. I think I'll summarize it for you because the reality is it's a complicated question, and I kind of view two sides to the coin. One, there's a fiscal component, which option is the least expensive, but then the second side is there's an operational component, and what type of operational impact would one decision have over the other. So currently the state police own their fixed-wing Cessna 182T aircraft, and that's used for aircraft enforcement activities. And one of the benefits of owning the aircraft is that there are no limits on hours. If you lease an aircraft, much like a motor vehicle, there's often hour limits, and then there's a cost structure built over time if you exceed those yearly hour limits. Those don't exist with the owned aircraft. You also control your maintenance evolutions. Those typically would be at the discretion of the lessor on when those maintenance have to occur. Some obviously have to happen based on hours of use and must occur. Others are more discretionary. And then finally, there's direct control over operations that state police currently have over their existing owned plane. They would lose some of that option from a leased perspective because of those maintenance intervals that might be required by contract. Another consideration has to do with leasing out the entire operation. So not just the aircraft and the maintenance, but also the pilots. There's some concerns there with availability. There's some concerns there with the what type of pilot you're receiving from the vendor. You can't typically in those arrangements choose if you prefer pilot A over pilot B when an operation needs to be flown. And the other issue there might be whether or not we can afford a lease that would allow for 24/7 response operations from a pilot perspective. So these are all unknown costs at this point. We have not done any formal request for information from any available aircraft leasing companies. We did do some initial review to see if there were any planes available that would meet our needs. It does not look like there are many. Not saying there aren't any. I'm sure that we could find some, but it doesn't look like there's a significant leasing market for the type of plane that we currently operate. There are other types of planes that are available, and we'd have to determine if those would fit our operating needs. And then finally, there was some initial research done with other state police and city police departments of similar size to state police. Maryland State Police, Delaware State Police, New York City Police, and San Diego Police Department. All of them own and operate their planes in the same way that New Hampshire State Police currently does. So Whether or not there's a practice in law enforcement of leasing, we'd have to do more research. This is a very small sample. But I do think that industry by industry, it's probably a different answer depending upon which industry you're focused in because of the limitations and benefits of a lease arrangement. So this memo just details some of those considerations, some of the initial research we've done so far. Again, I'd reiterate that we currently own our fixed-wing aircraft. It was purchased back in 2008 for $400,000. Based on some web searches, the approximate value is $380,000. The aircraft do retain their value because of that maintenance and rebuild on the engines that happens occasionally or periodically. We're not at this point planning on replacing the aircraft, but when that time comes, the division and the department would be open to looking at all options, including leasing, including lease-to-own options, because all of these factors could change at that point in time. And I'd be happy to answer any additional questions the committee may have.
Questions from the committee? Representative Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had an opportunity to speak to a couple of troopers when we were meeting in Manchester that had wings on their chest. And I'm wondering how many of them are there that are eligible to fly these airplanes or to ride along?
So we have 2 civilian pilots, and then the troopers are the troopers are, I'm looking for the exact name, tactical flight officers. So they're not flying the aircraft, but they're in the aircraft, communicating with the troopers on the ground and operating the equipment to conduct the enforcement activity.
And one of the other things I learned was that there's quite often 3 on the ground that are involved, 3 troopers on the ground that are involved in any of these things. But they said that they kind of go after the people that are going more than 80 miles an hour, and that's the big ticket, so that it pays for this program by not going after the guy that's 10 miles over the speed limit or something. So that's hundreds of dollars tickets, these ones they catch. I saw the other day 127 miles an hour, but you wouldn't need an airplane to figure that out.
Then they saw I was a senator, so they didn't write the ticket.
Right.
But it looks like it's paying for itself, and I would imagine if you rented an airplane, did you look into any of the hourly costs if you rented a similar size airplane?
We weren't able to find anything that was comparable to what we currently have, and so we haven't been able to go to that level of detail. The belief on our end is that when you're entering into that lease or rental arrangement, the costs of the maintenance are going to be rolled into the expense, and you're going to absorb those one way or the other.
Yep.
The benefit is new equipment potentially at the end of that term, but for aircraft that are used in this capacity, that may not be as large a benefit for some other types of industries.
Would seem to be pretty limited in the hours they could fly. You'd need daylight, clear skies more or less, and good visibility. So, 30 hours a month or so is about what you're going to get, I guess. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Senator Hennessy.
We just make a motion to remove this from the list.
Motion made. Do we have a second to remove this from the list?
I'll second it.
And seconded by Umberger. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. And the weatherization program, did we dispose of that? No?
It could be something something the ARP program could throw some money at, from what I read.
Keep the virus from coming in the window.
Yeah. Keep the windows closed. Yeah.
But looking at the scope of time and so on, that you'd have to use that money, and I don't know if by the time we got the audit back, whether there'd be much time to put in for that in the program. So anyway,
Yeah,
it's just a
but-
thought.
if I might. I mean, the weatherization program, I think, is something that should be audited. I mean, we are putting money all the time into weatherization, and I'm not sure whether it's ever been reviewed or not. But you know, they have rules, and I just think that it should proceed as an audit.
I don't,
I concur.
okay.
Sounds like a motion and a second.
I concur.
So your motion is to continue the program? The audit of the program?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a topic.
Want to vote?
Vote.
Sure. We have a motion and a second to continue with the weatherization audit. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Steve, do we have anything else?
We don't. I will, we'll draft up a letter for the fiscal meeting next month and for your signature for this weatherization topic.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Seeing no further business,
Move to adjourn.
meeting is adjourned.